So rent control is a hot button topic right now across the country, and I'm here to lay out the pros and cons of both the short and long-term effects, and also to really sift through all the BS and tell you how it's going to affect you going forward. So just like the traditional housing market, the rental market right now is scarce. There's very few places to rent, just like there's very few places to buy. So what rent control is really meant to do is to prevent landlords from exploiting their tenants by increasing rent drastically, because they know that they don't really have anywhere to go. So it's either pay it or hit the road. So right off the bat, one of the biggest pros of a rent controlled area or a rent controlled building is that when a tenant moves in, they don't have to worry about the landlord doubling the rent the next year and having to move. They know that they're going to be there for a long time. It ultimately boosts their morale. They like to live there, and it's better for the community if everybody is more secure in where they live and not worried about having to leave in a year because the rent just doubled. And what that really is exploitation at its core, and it's unfair, and it does need to be controlled. And the final and most important benefit of rent control, especially for the politicians, is it looks great on paper and it gets votes. So before we get into the both short and long-term cons of rent control, let's talk for a second about landlords. There's the narrative out there that landlords are the big bad rich people just collecting money, kind of like Ebenezer Scrooge in A Christmas Carol, and they do nothing for the community, when in fact 90% of single family rental landlords are mom and pop owners. And what a mom and pop owner is someone that owns 1 to 4 units. So these are not big corporations that own billions of dollars worth of real estate, just charging the little man whatever they want. A lot of these people depend on their tenants for their income, and in general these people take care of their properties and they care about their tenants. So a couple of the direct negatives for rent control: it gives the landlord no incentive to make improvements to the property. If I'm a landlord and I know that if I dump $5,000 into this apartment to improve it for my tenant, but I can't charge more in rent to compensate for that, why would I ever improve it? The other thing is, the longevity of rent control can be a good thing, but it can also go too far and be negative. For example, let's just take a family. We'll call them the Joneses. And the Joneses are a couple that have 3 small children, and they rent a 3-bedroom apartment. Now those children grow up and they move out, and let's just say tragically Mr. Jones, he passes away, and now it's just Mrs. Jones there. But the thing is, Mrs. Jones is super comfortable with the rent because it's not going up much, so she can pay it, and she doesn't want to leave her home. She's one person, she's in a 3-bedroom apartment, and she's never going to move. So that means there's another family out there that needs a 3-bedroom apartment that doesn't get it because Mrs. Jones is comfy cozy in hers. So one of the reasons that rent prices are so high right now is just supply and demand. There's not very many places to rent, therefore the prices of those places just by nature go higher. Thing is, landlords have choices, so we're going to get into some of the long-term negative effects. These landlords that have choices because they have money may take their ball and go home, essentially. If I'm an investor and I have $1 billion and I want to build a 50-unit apartment building, well, if I'm going to be restricted in what I can charge and be told what I can and can't do, instead of building a 50-unit apartment building, I'll build a 50-unit condo building and sell them all off. And there's less now to rent than there was before. So that's essentially what's going to happen. If you constrict landlords on what they can do, they're going to take their money and they're going to go elsewhere, and they're not going to develop more properties to be available for rent. So if this were to happen across a large scale, what it really would do, it would decrease the supply even further and thus increase prices even further. And that's a long-term effect that a lot of people don't see because it's not right in front of them. And we all know that taxes inherently always go up. So if you have a government that's going to raise your taxes but also tell you can't charge any more than you already are, and that margin is getting squeezed more and more, well, what you're going to do is you're going to sell it and you're going to get rid of it. So one of the best, safest, and most sustainable ways to lower rent prices is to increase supply. Basically, if there's more units available, people can't charge as much because they want to attract renters now. They need people to fill their spaces. So rent prices inherently will come down. So in order to make everybody happy, we need to increase supply. We need to encourage investors and landlords to build more rental units. And the way to do that is not rent control, at least in its current form. I do believe that there should be regulations and rules to prevent exploitation on especially lower income communities, but rent control in its current form will ultimately decrease supply and make the problem worse. So the goal of this video was just to let people see both sides of the coin and not just what's in the headlines, because a lot of times those can be misleading. If you like this video, if you found you got value in it, please give it a like, subscribe, and I will be posting more videos in the future that can help you out.